Hey everyone, hope you're having a good day, and I'm so glad you made it to community group. I have some discussion questions for you, but before we get into that, I want to take a minute to recap the sermon from Sunday. So, we are in a series called A Worthwhile Life, and we're going through the book of Philippians asking the question, what is a worthwhile life? And this week we backed up from last week. We're in chapter 1, verses 12 to 26. And here we actually get some background on Paul. We find that Paul's actually writing this letter to the Philippians from a prison in Rome. He's in jail. And he's writing the Philippians just basically saying, hey, I'm okay. Don't worry about me. And he actually starts in verse 12 saying, now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. And he basically says, yeah, um, life, it's not great because I'm in prison, but there's a bunch of good stuff happening. First of all the guards know about Jesus now because of me. I've been telling everybody about Jesus. But also, um, it's inspired the congregation in Rome, the church in Rome, to boldness. A lot of people, because of my imprisonment, are bold and are preaching the gospel. And actually, there's some division. He didn't plant this church in Rome, and so some people, some of the leaders in Rome, are trying to use this as a time to increase their authority and their leadership and their presence. And so they're preaching more. And he says, granted, that's not a good thing that they're trying to usurp my authority, but they're still preaching the gospel. And either way, whether it's because of boldness or because of selfishness, the gospel is being preached. Lots of people are coming to Jesus. This is a great thing. And so he's talking about this, and he says, I want you to keep praying for me because I want to have sufficient courage that my body will be exalting God, whether in death or in life. And this brings us to this verse that everybody knows, the famous verse 21, where he says, for me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. And he's basically saying, I'm torn. Um, if I die, I get to be with Jesus. But if I live, there's so much fruitful ministry that's happening. And that brought us to the main point of our sermon that Pastor Jason preached this week, which is a life is worth living when you have a cause worth dying for. A life is worth living when you have a cause worth dying for. So I've got some questions for you. The first is an icebreaker question. It's a fun question. Um, if you were in a Roman prison, now remember, these prisons were different than the ones we have today. You were basically just chained to the wall and you didn't have anything. You relied on your family and friends to bring you food and anything else you may need. So now, if you were stranded in a Roman prison, what would be the one thing that you would need? You'd need your family to bring. Maybe it's a Twinkie, maybe it's your iPad, I don't know. Think about it. What's the one thing that you would not want to live without in a Roman prison? Go ahead and talk about that. I'll give you a second. So, the second question, and this was actually the challenge at the end of the sermon, what are you doing to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ? That's the life we live, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what makes our life worthwhile. That's the cause worth dying for. And the challenge at the end of the sermon was every day wake up and think of, ask the Holy Spirit, what is something I could do to advance the gospel? And it doesn't have to be going to prison. It could be something small like talking to someone in the hallway or just sharing God's love. But take a minute and begin to talk about that. What is the Holy Spirit convicting you of? Maybe you haven't thought about it yet. Well, think about it now and share what's something you could do to advance the gospel. And go ahead and take a couple minutes and discuss that. So your last question, and this question can lead into prayer. Um, just like Paul, often living is harder than dying. Living for the gospel is harder than dying for the gospel because it causes pain, and it's a pain that's recurring. It's something that keeps going. And so I want to ask you, in what ways are you suffering for the gospel? And that doesn't mean you're in prison. It doesn't mean that you have a horrible life. But often, just because of decisions you have to make in living for Jesus, you can have some pain, or there can just be difficulty in life, and that's okay. We need to recognize those things and recognize that we're living for a deeper glory, the gospel. And so take stock, take a couple minutes, think about it, maybe share in your group just certain things that you're doing for God, or ways in which you're living for God that are just causing some pain in your life, causing some difficulty in your life. Go ahead and share that. And after you do, why don't you pray for each other? Just like Paul asked the church to pray for him, why don't you guys spend some time just praying for each other, that you would have strength, that God would give you wisdom and direction in how to live a life worthy of the gospel. So those are your 3 questions. Have a great time, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.